It's okay? Yeah. All right, thanks very much for having me. I am a little less funny than Allison, I will say, but first I will point out that her, especially the noise poem, reminded me a lot of Alvin Lucier's. I am sitting in a room, the vector instead in that case is kind of the iterative recording and how the particular plosive consonants, etc., remain constant while the vector and acoustics are kind of changing the actual content of the poem. If the work is available online if you're not familiar with it. Maybe you'll hear some sonic resonances with Allison's work. So I was asked to come because I write about libraries and archives and information spaces and architectures. I was invited to come and do a little bit of to help situate the library out there, which I hope you've all taken advantage of and explored within the context of this larger event. So I will start. So for those of us who've been up on the stage today, this cybernetic extravaganza probably came into being through a conversation with or an email from one of the event organizers. For most of you sitting out there, the conference likely began as a website that looks like one I probably would have made in college while listening to math rock. I'm sorry. Okay. It offers some scrolling text, a heady blurb, and a list of names. If those words piqued your interest, you clicked a link and jumped over to another website where the promise of intellectual exchange compelled you to engage in a financial transaction yielding tickets. A digital record of your purchase might have brought you through these doors on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday evening for one of 3 workshops. Even for those of us gathered here and now, ostensibly for the same event, the cybernetic phenomenon is composed of a variety of integrated platforms. To our remote viewers, we are probably a low-resolution feed streaming from their laptops or smartphones. This probably looks nothing like what has happened on stage here today, though. For those of us whose bodies are present in this room, you, disciplined in your linear rows of furnishings or milk crates, and my elevation and amplified voice, and me, also slightly intimidated by that amplification and elevation, the architecture and acoustics and organized schedule are controlling the terms of our interaction. This kind of goes back to that automatically generated question before about how social forms kind of dictate forms of interaction. In a few minutes, when we transitioned into a different formal arrangement up here, hence the 5 chairs on stage, the terms of that interaction and its discursive politics will change. Websites and workshops, lectures and live streams, structured Q&As and informal interstitial chit-chat, and all the tweets and Facebook posts that are likely augmenting our immediate reality, each of those communication systems structures the nature of our exchange with one another and with all of the information and ideas floating around in this room between us. They make this cybernetic carnival a system of communicative systems, each with its own aesthetics and rhetorics and politics. This is nothing unique. Most conferences nowadays are similarly multi-platform affairs, but very few conferences have their own library and librarian, let alone their own library simulation, and a 636-item catalog. So what distinguishes the library as a communicative form and a control mechanism? There are a whole bunch of interlocking infrastructures and protocols operating at different scales and sometimes with different logics. We'll take a look at just a few. So let's start at the geographic scale. So library systems typically call to mind a public architectural geography composed of central libraries and branches. Rarely do we give thought to the networks linking those individual nodes, let alone the Uber system that extends far beyond the library's built environments, catalogs, and databases. But these networks are crucial. The wealth of our library's resources and services could never be contained within their walls. If our little branch libraries, like the Carnegie you see there on the right, were reconstructed to accommodate the entire material and digital collection its patrons have access to, each Carnegie would probably be bigger than the Star at Lehigh building, which you see there on the left. Each of those branches have their own branch operations in the form of distributed, offsite storage, servers, and managerial operations. I don't know how many of you have been here, but this is Book Ops in Long Island City. It's a sorting facility that serves all of the New York and Brooklyn Public Library branches. And it's one example of the integral, if often overlooked, components that make up a complex internetwork of library logistics. Its built environment, backstage spaces of labor and resource allocation, and a widely distributed digital terrain. And this space also enables the movement and sharing of library resources and services. In 2004, library consultant Lauren Dempsey proposed that librarians think about their work, particularly the pathway from resource discovery to delivery, in logistical terms. The manufacturing and shipping worlds have, of course, long labored over the perfection of logistical systems, and Dempsey argued that libraries' expanding collaborative efforts, among them the management of electronic resources and shared print collections and high-density storage facilities, pose similar supply chain management challenges. Scholars across a variety of fields have already engaged logistics. Architects and geographers have examined the theme as a spatial design phenomenon, and my field of media studies has recently turned its attention to logistical media that coordinate and control the movement of people, things, and capital and ideas across time and space. Book stacks, delivery trucks, call numbers, catalogs, collection management software, and interlibrary loan systems all might be counted among libraries' wide range of logistical media. This is all from Book Ops, the place in Long Island City. And as I toured it a few summers ago and marveled at its conveyor belts and computer monitors displaying a panoply of enterprise management software, it became apparent just how critical interoperability is among these media, their alignments and misalignments, and how critical they are to the functioning of library systems' many interlocking networks. Simply put, libraries need software, which some call middleware, to mediate between the countless software platforms they use to operate. But the definition of library as middleware might also be extended to include hardware, as the material operations within library buildings and the physical connections between those buildings are profoundly dependent upon layers and layers of interconnected software, just as their digital resources rely on physical, place-based materials and labor. In nodes like Book Ops and across library systems, middleware ties the physical and the virtual together. It's hard to wrap one's head around the breadth of these distributed systems, all the far-flung truck routes, database subscriptions, interlibrary loans, and protocols. But acknowledging this complicated logistical network makes visible the labor, equipment, and expertise required to build and maintain our libraries, one of our society's few remaining intellectual and cultural commons. Grappling with the means by which our technical and intellectual resources are internetworked also helps us recognize that logistical consolidation can be put toward multiple ends. We can produce a global panoptical Google, or with the same software, produce a universal public resource. We choose whether to advocate for corporate monopolies or cultural commons. In other words, what type of control we want our communication and computation systems to affect. Better understanding and investing in the logistical systems that route our power, packages, and particularly with libraries, knowledge, means greater potential to shape not only our built landscapes, but also our political and intellectual ones. If you're interested in this esoteric world of library logistics, and I have to say, who would not be? I wrote an article a couple years ago about Book Ops and Recap, which is a high-density storage facility, pretty amazing, in Princeton, that serves Princeton and Columbia University libraries and all of the research libraries of the New York Public Library. And library consortiums, that this article also acknowledges library consortiums, concerted efforts to manage corporate vendors and extensive database subscriptions. If you have any access to something like ProQuest or Project Muse or JSTOR, any one of those databases, or particularly medical, scientific databases, libraries, academic libraries have to pay exorbitant fees for them. So librarians often band together to try to negotiate better subscription fees. So I conclude that article by examining the friction and feedback between the various systems that constitute an information infrastructure. I note that all the place-bound physical materials and seemingly placeless digital resources of the library follow distinct patterns and pathways of acquisition, processing, delivery, and maintenance. And the logistical spaces, like Book Ops and Recap, that carry out those processes mediate between the human and the machine. They're cybernetic. They make use of automated conveyance systems that structure but ultimately depend upon workers' manual labor. They use barcodes and conveyor belts in tandem with analog systems, like as you can see on the left, color-coded paper slips denotating a book's language and location, stacks of plastic bins, not unlike these over here, to route materials to their destinations. In collection development, data-driven analytics rub up against staff expertise and patrons' unpredictable desires to drive decisions regarding what materials to acquire and where to keep them. Patrons access books through digital interfaces with nested layers of software behind them. In all cases, middleware, not just mediating software, but also mediating spaces and people, has to reconcile the old and the new, the hard and the soft, the automated and the manual, the human readable and computer intelligible. So libraries are cybernetic systems of systems. They're composed of intersecting, entangled architectures and infrastructures of control. They're logistical operations, they're built spaces, architectures. If you subscribe to any design blogs, you've probably seen this about 10 million times in the past couple days. It's a library that, surprise, not all of these people are now seem to be shocked to find that not all of the books are real. I mean, they can't be real if the shelf is 20 feet above your head and there's no way to actually architecturally reach it. Anyway, this is kind of the library of the week, or library du jour. So the architecture is one of those cybernetic systems that's controlling the flow of people and information and their relationship to each other, interior design and furnishings. And the habitus, this like the nature of relations that they all together cultivate. Libraries are also storage structures, they're network architectures and nodes of digital inclusion, they're classification systems, they're catalogs, they're boring vendor agreements and access policies and circulation mechanisms. And they're middleware, all the stuff, software and hardware, architecture and bodies, protocols and policies that has to mediate feedback between these different operational and political and epistemological regimes. So that's the end of what I prepared, but we're going to transition now into a conversation with the folks who actually put the library together, including designing all of those different layers and scales of infrastructure, this physical space, the simulation, the catalog, the collection itself, which, as you know, is a composite of multiple individual institutions' donations. So, conference organizers, am I doing the right thing? We should call them up to the stage now? Okay.